welcome everybody. Welcome back, and then we are again on Renewables in Africa platform. And today, as usual, we having a very exciting guest that we want to talk to you about. Right. So, welcome to this exciting, enlightening interview. So today, I have the pleasure to hosting Wangari Muchiri. She is the director of Africa at GWEC. Right. And we're here to explore the winds of change, in Africa energy landscape, and also the upcoming global climate change at COP28 in Dubai. Yeah. So, what do you know about Wangari? So, if you know anything about that, about her, please make sure that you drop a comment to let me know what you know. And but what I can tell you is she's a visionary leader with worth of experience in the renewables energy, and she's here to share her insight on the transformative potential of wind power in Africa and its critical role is playing in addressing climate change on a global scale. So I want you to get ready to dive in this world of wind energy, of sustainable development, and also looking at the opportunity that lie ahead. So I would like you as well to invite you to engage. Please ask questions because for me, I have already this luxury of talking to her on a regular basis, but I want you to be asking questions directly. Just don't be shy. Just ask a question, to ask her what you want to know, and be part of this important conversation. So without further ado, so I want to dive right in. So, and I want to welcome to the stage, so Wangari. Hey Wangari, how are you?
Hello. Hi, Tony. How are you doing? It's a pleasure to be here.
Very good, very good. Let me just stop the music because I want to make sure that I can hear you properly.
No problem. We don't
So
want to dance today. Today
how
we're
has the
talking
day
about
been for you? Sorry, you were saying?
it's been great. It's quite hectic. I was saying before that we don't want to dance today. Today we're talking about wind, but I'm sure at COP28 we can
Yeah.
keep the come later.
Um,
Yes, it's been a great day for me. I think things are heating up. In the
mhm.
renewable energy sector in Africa, so my days tend to be, back to back to back. But I
Mhm.
think it's a good. That's a good problem to have. So my day is going well. How's yours going?
Mine as well is definitely getting busier
Yeah.
because obviously, as you know, we are approaching COP28, and
Yes.
there's usually a lot of activity around COP28, and yeah, and that's why it's good to bring people like yourself. And wind as well. So I particularly like it because, like I say, in 2017, I think I mentioned that to you in the past. So I actually wrote a book. I wrote a book about wind energy because I remember at the time I was just a consultant, and there was a lot of information about solar, and I love solar, obviously for sure. But I couldn't find enough on wind, and just like that, I said to myself, okay, if there isn't any information about wind, let me just write a book about wind, and that was, I believe, actually still today. The first book talking about wind energy outlook in Africa. Obviously, now there are others, but that's great. But it's good to have you back here, and
Thank
that is fantastic. So, before we dive into the conversation, would you mind maybe having a little bit of a introduction of who you are so people really get to know. So, who is this very smart lady that I'm having this today?
Great. Thank you so much. And I mean, as I said before, it's an honor to be here. I think I told you, I don't know if it was at the beginning of this year at the Africa Energy in Daba, that I followed renewables in Africa for a long time. And I really love the platform that you provide for renewable energy. And great to hear your love for wind as well. I think we share that passion together. So my name is Wangari Muchiri. I'm the director of Africa at the Global Wind Energy Council. I'm a renewable energy engineer by background. I studied renewable energy engineering more than a decade ago. I've been in the energy space ever since, with a passion for all renewable energy technologies. But I think wind really has ran ahead in my career. I started initially in Australia, where I used to aggregate buyers to
Mm,
offtake wind farms. So I used to work for a real estate company, and as you know, energy is one of the biggest bills within the real estate sector and operationally when you're operating a building. So we had the challenge to one, reduce the cost of energy, but also make it more sustainable. And so in that role, I started to touch base with wind farms and what's this wind energy we're talking about. And so that was my first touch with wind energy. Following that, I came back to Kenya and I worked for a Dutch NGO called Hivos, where I was in the solar sector now, off grid, working with blockchain technology and solar, trying to enable trading of energy between two different players using blockchain and mobile money. And we set up a pilot program in Kajiado, which is here in Kenya, in a rural off grid community. And then GWEC came calling, and I leaned back into my wind roots, and started working with GWEC as the director of Africa Wind Power. And Africa Wind Power is a new, now we're about 2 years old. It's a new initiative where we're trying to really increase the development and deployment of wind energy in Africa. As you said before very correctly, there's not a lot of information around wind in Africa. There's not a lot of information about how to develop wind farms, how many people are doing it, what are the projects across Africa. So we're really looking to change that. We're funded by our donor. Our donor is called Get Invest. So I really like to plug them here, because anyone who's looking to develop a wind farm, or even any sort of technologies, a mini grid, they really have great programs in terms of finance readiness, and even getting people access to finance, which is one of the biggest challenges we have on the continent. So great to be here. I know it's a long introduction, but I hope I managed to cover everything, and now people can know what my background is.
Definitely, it's definitely worth it. So all I can remember is I'm gonna have to charge Get Invest for giving them visibility. Yeah, or one of their main program. That's fine. Great. So I know you definitely want to talk about the report that you released recently. But before we dive into that, I know there's a couple of pages that you want to showcase, and after that we can come back to our discussion. I was wondering whether you can provide us with an overview of the current state of wind power development in Africa. What do you see as the key trends and challenges in the region wind energy?
Okay. There's a few things. So there's actually two reports that I will refer to. The first report is the report we've recently launched at Windaba, which was earlier in October. And it's a report that really takes count of the status of wind in Africa. So we took stock and said, what is happening in Africa? How much wind is actually being developed? Are there projects in different countries? Because we only hear a lot of the times about the big projects. We hear about Electricana Wind Farm in Kenya. We hear about some projects in South Africa. We hear Egypt has announced 10 gigawatts. But really, there is a lot of other development that's happening on the continent. I know a lot of people don't know that, for example, Senegal, 15% of Senegal's energy comes from wind. As well, in Kenya, 17%. Comes from wind. So a lot of people don't know some of these nuances. People don't even know that in Nigeria in the north is a 10 megawatt project, which has had its challenges, but it's there, so there is some uptake of the technology on the continent. And I think we decided to take stock of that and do a status of wind in Africa report. What we found from that report is that when you look across the continent, there's 140 projects, which is mind-boggling, because I can't even imagine 140 projects. I've myself only been on a few of the projects in Africa. So 140 means there's quite a lot of appetite for the technology. And these projects account to maybe 86 gigawatts. To give you an idea, the total renewable energy we have on the continent at the moment is 59 gigawatts. So it's almost, another third more that we have in just wind projects on the continent. But there's still a lot of challenges: financing, policy, different things that are kind of hindering the projects from really, to getting to financial close and to be constructed. One of the things also that the report really highlights is some of the drivers, right? And in addition to wind being a great technology, the price of wind coming down. I know in some countries it's as low as 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which is fantastic. So those are the main drivers. Of course, is cost, but also sustainability, people wanting to decarbonize their grids. And in addition to that, we're also seeing, as the continent grows and as the population grows, we need to put additional capacity onto the grid, but we need to do it quickly, right? And so if we want to build coal plants and gas power plants, those are going to take a lot of time, maybe 10 years, sometimes even more. But we're seeing a solar farm or a wind farm can come on much quicker. In some areas, 2 years, in some areas, 4 or 5 years. So if we want to bring additional capacity onto the grid in many African countries, renewables and wind are a good option. In addition to that, we're also seeing renewable energy coming onto the grid to help grid stabilization. And I think we'll talk about grids a bit later on in this conversation. But grids are our biggest challenge on the continent. So when you want to find a way to balance the grid, wind and solar together are really good. I've heard of projects where it's wind, solar, and batteries together, which are giving almost baseload-like profiles. So that is also helping balance frequencies on the grids and balance, the output of the electrons that we put into the grid from the renewables. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I'll even give you an example. There's a small 2.4 megawatt project in Tanzania, which is being used to balance the hydrology. So hydropower has gone down because hydrology has gone down due to droughts. And so the operators have included wind in this project so that they can increase that and reduce the effect of the reduced hydrology. So we are seeing that, there are different applications that are coming into play in Africa for wind. And then finally, there's a big question around green hydrogen. And this is very exciting for us. It's very contested. It's a very contested issue, depending on who you ask. But we're seeing a lot of wind projects being announced for green hydrogen. Some of the biggest ones on the continent, like in Egypt, in South Africa, are coming in for green hydrogen. So this is also quite an interesting conversation to be had. We are seeing that, there is talk about the green hydrogen being exported to Europe, but I think the more important thing is how can we use it locally? How can we create fertilizer? How can we create sustainable aviation fuels from these green hydrogen outputs? And these are some of the different today's drivers of what, why people are installing wind. I can also talk, Tony, I can talk for ages about also.
That's fine. That's okay.
For tomorrow, but allow me to just mention two. Some of the drivers that are coming up that will really spur the development of wind going forward is things like e-mobility. So we've seen at the Africa Climate Summit, our President Ruto was driving an e-mobility car, like a small car that's an EV, and that's fantastic. It's really becoming a lot more popular. Bikes now, motorbikes on the road that are used for delivery and for transporting people are now going to be electric. So we're seeing e-mobility really coming into play. And one of the things a lot of people don't know is that wind is better at night. So you have a lot of solar is great during the day. Wind is really, really good at night. And so a lot of these cars charge at night. So e-mobility really and wind are going to be coupled together to work together to really create a new ecosystem for travel and for transport in Africa. And then finally, one of the other things that's coming up quite a bit is the repowering of old wind farms. So wind farms that maybe are 20 years old or 25 years old, how do we get those smaller turbines, which might have been 0.8 of a megawatt back in the day, and now we're at 5 megawatts for one turbine? How do we get those turbines, which are in areas that have great resource, how do we get them to this bigger numbers now that turbines have really increased in terms of their size and their capacity? So those are the drivers that we're seeing a lot across the continent, and I think it's an exciting space really to be in, and I'm glad to be talking to you about it today.
Excellent. And you mentioned a report a few times. I was wondering, I know you mentioned two reports. Maybe we can show one of those reports. And I think there was a couple of pages that you wanted to flag. So I'm just going to share that and I'll let you maybe talk about that. I'm just going to be on the backstage for that.
No problem. Thank you so much. So the second report I wanted to really touch on is now coming in line with the question that this webinar today really addresses, and what should COP28 really deliver? What are we looking for as we go to Dubai and the UAE and the conversations and the negotiations that are going to happen? This report really is looking at that. And I think one of the key messages underlying all this is that we need to triple our renewable energy potential across the world globally, and in Africa we even need to go beyond that, maybe to 5 times renewable energy capacity right now, given what was shared in the Nairobi Declaration. So I'll skip ahead and just show you a few of the pages, and you can always download this report on the Global Renewables Alliance page. But on page 11 of this report, it actually shows a few of the recommendations. And I don't know if you can see the screen because it looks like it's frozen, but hopefully you guys can see it. And some of the recommendations that we're hoping to come out of COP28 is, one, we need a tripling of renewables. It's not enough to have, the progress we've had. I mean, it's fantastic, but we need to go much faster, quicker, and cheaper. And tripling renewables across the world is going to be what we're really looking to push at COP28. We're hoping to get some of this text in the actual COP language and in the COP text, the output of the COP process. So this is quite key. I think it's important that we talk about that. Another thing also is tripling renewables, but also doubling energy efficiency. As much as we can triple the amount of energy that we produce, it's important that what we do already consume is as efficient as possible. So we're looking at doubling down on energy efficiency. And I think this is also one of the key things we're looking to do to remain really on a 1.5-degree pathway. I'll skip forward as well. I think some of the other things that come to mind is that we also need to have really robust policy, but also really innovative financing mechanisms. So how are we looking at blended finance to get these projects off the ground? And when you talk to a lot of the developers on the continent, they'll talk about policy really hindering some of the progress that they could have made, but also financing. How easy is it to get finance? How expensive is the cost of this financing that we are talking about on the continent? And I think these are two things that we need to really look at. And then finally, I know you guys can read the reports for yourselves, but I think one of the things we also need to look at more closely is this international cooperation, but also South-South collaboration, North-South collaboration, where we have skills transfer, we have knowledge transfer, we have reskilling, we have a lot of the expertise right now is really focused in the global North. How do we bring that to Africa? How do we bring it to Asia, to Latin America? I think it's important. Those are important conversations to have. And in addition to that, how do we even bring some of the manufacturing that is happening on the continent? So how do we say, if we're going to triple our renewables or 5 times our renewables in Africa, how do we make sure that a lot of the components, whether it's the wind turbine blades or whether it's the solar panels, are not all being imported? How can we manufacture some of those within the continent using the critical minerals that we have to do value addition to these, to create jobs for our young population and be able to use the technologies directly? So I think these are some of the things that I wanted to touch on from this report, but I think Tony, you'll share the links so that anyone can download it and then we can go from there.
Excellent. I think that's brilliant. So the report is here available. Absolutely, we're gonna share the link there. So again, for me, a chance to say that if there are people that have immediate questions for Wangari, please do not hesitate to drop a question. I know some of you sometimes sending me questions directly in my message, maybe because they don't want to be seen in public. That's okay. I think I have a couple of questions that I've received. We're gonna go through that. But yeah, thank you very much for that report. That report is available and for you guys to download it. So let me just come back to one of the questions that I received, which was, can you talk more about the main barrier, to expanding wind power in Africa, and what kind of strategies or initiative, GWEC or any other stakeholders are pursuing to overcome this challenge? I think you mentioned about the potential of wind both in Senegal and Nigeria. Clearly, we don't know about 15% in Senegal. That's impressive. 10 megawatts in Nigeria is great. But how can we see more of that? So what are the barrier? What are the main barrier, and what kind of strategy initiative GWEC is putting in place to tackle that?
Great. I think that's a fantastic question, and thank you for the question for the person who asked that. I think there are 3 key challenges that we face on the continent. The first one is policy. And so we don't have, and I think if you've heard me speak many times, I keep saying vanilla policy. So policy that is very easy to understand, easy to predict, that you can really ensure that you can know if the government has set, let's say it's 100 gigawatts by a certain year, that's not going to change with the next people who come into power. And unfortunately, we don't really have that in Africa at the moment. So the policy regimes are really unpredictable. And so this also is a challenge for financiers and for investors, because they want to be able to easily predict how the renewable energy landscape will go. And so renewable energy is a big part of this. And I guess putting into play or developing renewable energy, you need the policy to support that. A lot of the times, power purchase agreements and investors who are looking at the power purchase agreements want to know that you're talking to the government, and they want to know that what the government has put in place will be there in 5 years or in 20 years when they're for however long their investment is. So I think policy is a big challenge. What we're doing to really help this across the continent is we're working with associations, and we 10 years ago we set up the South Africa Wind Energy Association. In Kenya we work through Electricity Sector Association of Kenya. In Mozambique, AMER. In Nigeria, the Nigeria Wind Energy Council. And even in Egypt, we're setting up the Renewable Energy Association there. So we work through in-country associations who really have the relationships and the networks, and also then the know-how to influence policy in their ministries of energy, through their different government offices. We help create policy briefs. So like the document that I've just shared before, which has key recommendation, these are the kind of the documents we want the policymakers to get their hands on, so that they have clear data that they can talk to when they're making policy and when they go into certain rooms where they have to defend certain policy decisions. So this policy element, I think, is one of the key challenges we had, and these are some of the things we're putting into play. I think the second one is financing. And I think one of the things we don't find a lot in Africa is early stage capital that is willing to take the risk to really take some of these programs. So if I have a wind farm that I want to build in a certain county in Kenya, finding the finance for that early stage pre-feasibility and feasibility is very, very difficult. So there are a few different programs that are helping with this, and I already mentioned Get Invest. I think Get Invest is great, but I think there's others that also can support with that. In addition to that, we find that the more mature capital wants the project to kind of already almost be put together, right? And this is not what's going to get projects off the ground. We're not going to get many great, well-structured projects that are ready to go to financiers. We do need to educate and skill people around this. And this is actually one of the things we're doing. We do host capacity building workshops. We've done one in Mozambique and one in Kenya so far, with private sector and public sector, where we bring in information around developing wind, developing what the best practices is across the world. We actually bring in experts from all across the world to share the knowledge, whether it's the utilities or the network operators, whether it's established developers on the continent. We really try to share this to help unlock this financing question, but also this knowledge question. And I think this now feeds into my third point, which the third I think challenge that we face is skills and knowledge, and having the right engineers who know the wind industry and who know how to develop wind farms and know certain nuances, like you need a year worth of wind data upfront when you're looking to develop a wind farm. So some of these things are also a big challenge. And in terms of the knowledge and reskilling gap, I think this is something that we're also working on next year. I think I'll announce this already, but it will be announced formally later. We're working on a webinar series with ICLE and how we can get the people to understand wind a bit better and the development of wind in Africa a little bit better. So it's important that also we disseminate the vast knowledge that we have from all our members, all the developers who are some of the biggest developers in the world at GWEC, that we can share that with the local developers here in Africa. But also we can share some of the best practices that happen in Africa. I'll give you an example, Kipeto Wind Farm, which has a great community engagement program. How do we share that case study with the rest of Africa and the rest of the world? And that's a bit of the work that we do to enable more knowledge sharing and reskilling and even upskilling for people to know about wind. So those are the three things and the three challenges that I would talk about.
Excellent. And definitely on knowledge sharing, this is something that we so passionate about, because if you don't know the information, you may just keep on repeating mistakes that don't need to be that need to be done. Absolutely. I think you definitely spot on there. I'm sure we're going to have multiple other conversations backstage. Another question that I had was this one that I'm displaying. So with COP28 approaching, what are your expectations for the role of wind in addressing climate change on a global scale, and what kind of specific outcome or commitment you hope to see? Because and let me just simply qualify that, because uh, a lot of people have become a little bit, I say, disengaged,
Mm.
disillusioned, because they keep on seeing the same basically spectacle every year, right? So people going, a lot of interest, and what usually come out of that, it's like I say, just window dressing measures, right? Nothing going depth. So they're losing a little bit faith in the process.
Yes.
So that's what I could understand this question. So yeah, I don't know whether you have some thought on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we're looking to really decarbonize our energy systems, it's important to note that we can't just build one technology, right? Many of us understand solar very well. We even might have solar on our rooftops, so you can understand the module. A panel, a solar panel goes on the roof, how it works. It's a bit, I mean, it's easy, I guess, easier to understand. But when you come to what we really need for the whole world, we need all a combination of all these technologies. We need solar, we need wind, we need hydropower, we need batteries, all together to enable us to really decarbonize our grid. And so I think approaching COP28, and this is one of the things that we're actually very proud about at GWEC, is that we led this initiative called the Global Renewables Alliance, where we brought together all the other technologies together so we can speak with one voice, right? Initially, you'd have solar speaking for itself here, wind speaking for itself here, batteries speaking for themselves, hydropower, green hydrogen. Now we're all together in one hub. We're able to be found in one space. You can come and talk to us about the different technologies. And we're actually inviting governments to speak to us so we can share with them what the best combination of all these technologies is for their countries. So I think in terms of my expectations, I'm happy to see all the renewables talking together with one voice at the Global Renewables Hub. And we welcome anybody who's here listening to join us on the pavilion. Come and say hello. Let's talk about what's happening in your country. But one of the things, even being from Kenya, that I've seen, and one of the things that makes our grid strong and even at over 90% renewables, is that it's not just one technology. We don't just lean on geothermal. We have fantastic geothermal, but we also have great wind, great solar, great hydropower. We are also now working on getting batteries onto our grid. So all these technologies come together, I think, is quite important. And I hope at COP28 we'll see more of these. And I'm also hoping that we'll have some great announcements of projects that are working, where different technologies are working together, announced at COP28. I think that would be great to see as well.
Excellent. That's brilliant. So I think there's something you mentioned before about not seeing enough early capital to come and just help this project just take off ground. And I'll be more than happy to say that later today we actually will be publishing a special webinar that we're doing on that with one of our partners they call Green Ventures, who are essentially positioning themselves as let's say an early equity investors who are there to help developers across the continent just to develop both solar and wind projects. So I think it's very important that you mentioned that, and it will be early December, 6th of December. But I'll be obviously we'll be providing the information all about that. But absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So another question that I had was this one. So in terms of policy and regulation, how important is it for African government to create a conducive environment, for wind and growth? So, are there any notable policy development in this regard that you can share?
Yeah. Absolutely. I've seen across the continent just how much policy can do. And I like to refer to South Africa with the REAP program. They have a renewable energy procurement program that has been quite successful. I think we're now, in bid window 7. So there's been 7 rounds of procurement of renewable energy, which has actually led South Africa to be the biggest market for wind on the continent. And I think this is a clear example of policy and regulation going ahead into the market and really spurring a new market and spurring a new industry. So I think it's important. I think it's very, very important. Where there is lack of policy and where it's not there, we're seeing that projects tend to be slower. Projects tend to take a longer time to develop, and this is also, I think, it's fair to say that policy really is a driver of this. What we have seen even in Kenya, when the PPA task force there was a review of all the PPAs, this has also caused a bit of uncertainty in the market, right? So some of this policy, we have robust policy that says once a contract is signed and it should take this long to develop and these are the steps and really outlines the processes, it would be a much easier kind of journey for developers. And if we want to really open out Africa for business and for renewable energy business, I think we need better policy, but also really good implementation and regulation of the policies put out there. So I always talk about Kenya in terms of we have great policy, we don't have great implementation. Whereas I think the two work hand in hand to ensure that we really are increasing wind in the continent.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And I have one other contribution here. I didn't hear the person's way. I think we're bold enough just to put the question out there. So Joseph, that I know very well, Wambugu, who's saying that, okay, hi, Tony, I'm willing to support any, I think is developing, he wants to say, not enveloping. I guess carbon credit for the
Yes.
wind project in Africa. So I think, thank you for the comment, Joseph. I really appreciate that. So allow me just to say, so what is happening on that side? Because from carbon finance, I know there's a lot that also is happening. COP27 sort of launched the carbon finance, carbon credit market for Africa. There was a special initiative there. So how can we build on that, and how can it benefit specifically wind projects? Like, for example, Joseph was suggesting here.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that wind is actually one of the biggest technologies in terms of getting carbon credits in Africa. So I know Lake Turkana wind farm got some carbon credits. I also know Kipeto wind farm, I think, also got some carbon credits. So wind is, we do use carbon credits because the upfront cost or the capital cost of developing a wind farm is high. So where you can get a bit of concession and where you can reduce that initial cost, I mean, it's important that we lean into that. So I think within the energy space, we've also seen it with KenGen. Within the energy space, carbon credits are really working, and if there's a way that we can encourage more energy projects to take on these carbon credits, because you can directly show you're avoiding carbon emissions by building renewable energy as opposed to fossil fuels, then that's fantastic. I do know there is some contention around carbon credits, and I am in no way an expert. I always lean on my carbon credit expert friends for their input. But I think where it is working and you can show it's working, I think it's important, and it is really working in the renewable energy space. I can share that for sure.
Excellent. So let me ask a couple of questions before we wrap it up, because I think I had you for quite some time here. So you talk about the skills, very important, and you say that that's one of the area it's going to be obviously putting the industry downwards if we don't address that. So at GWEC, what is that you're doing specifically, and also partners, members of GWEC? So what kind of initiative are out there just to make sure that we can train the local force to develop a local market, and also later on to create as well a local manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One of the things that we are doing, we have a fantastic, robust Women in Wind program. And this Women in Wind program really trains women across the world to really know about different elements of wind development, whether it's the production of turbines, whether it's the development of the actual wind farms, whether it's offshore wind. We have that training skills, and that's specifically for women in wind. And I'd like to touch on that first, because that was my first touch with the Global Wind Energy Council. I was part of the Women in Wind program, and I learned a lot through that program. I was mentored by a very senior executive in the wind industry across the world. And I think these are, it's a great way to really expose African women and women from across the global south to wind development from end to end, not just in maybe the one small sector that they work in. Going wider than that, and going beyond the gender balance gap, we also work a lot in creating webinars, so online and virtual spaces. And I mentioned before, we're going to be launching a webinar series next year where we'll be talking about wind and how to develop wind and the different aspects of wind with ICLEI. So I think that's going to be quite exciting. anybody who is interested in joining, they're called energy exchanges. Joining these energy exchanges, we would be happy to have you, and I hope you learn a lot around that. In addition to that, we also do capacity building, and this is a big part of actually the Africa Wind Power umbrella, where we do capacity building for governments, but also for local private sector. And what I mean by this is you could be a developer in the solar space. You have really enjoyed being in this space, but you want to look at a new technology. And so some of these people, we bring them into these capacity building workshops and teach them about how to develop wind, how to do biodiversity studies, how to look at the financing landscape, what makes a bankable PPA. These are some of the different things that we like to teach private sector about, but we also do that for public sector. So for governments, people within the Ministry of Energy, the regulators, because it's also important that as much as the private sector knows about how to develop wind, also the public sector knows how to receive, whether it's a PPA or whether it's, information, they also know what to expect and how to set really good standards for the industry. So we do a lot of training in that sector as well. And then finally, we also do a lot of work through our associations. And I think I mentioned this before, but associations in each country are key. Right now, our newest association, the Nigeria Wind Energy Council, that will be the wind voice for, that will be the main voice for wind in Nigeria, which means we're going to have workshops. We're planning on having a West Africa workshop soon, where we'll train and talk to people and teach people about developing wind in Africa. And what the potential is for that. A lot of people don't know that we have so much potential, but also they don't know, where to start. If you have great land and there's a lot of wind on it, how do you even do the initial measurements? So there's quite a lot of different initiatives that we're working on to really train people and upskill people. In addition to that, I know the South Africa Wind Energy Association also has a lot of training that they do. They actually work with a body called Saratech, which is a renewable energy technology company. Not company. It's like an academy for renewables, and you can go to Saratech in South Africa, learn about wind in partnership with the South Africa Wind Energy Association. So there's quite a lot happening across the continent in terms of teaching around wind. And then finally, and I think this is, you get an exclusive, Tony, just because it's you.
Oh,
We're also working on a wind farm incubator program. So we want people who are interested in developing wind farms across the continent. We're slowly working on this. It's still a while away, but we'll definitely share it on all our pages when it's ready. And we want new developers, nascent people who want to go into this industry, who think they might have an area of land that might be great for wind. We want to help incubate those programs and enable them to have, really well-structured early stage projects, so that when they go to the IFCs and African Development Banks for financing, the project can stand on its 2 feet. And so that's one of the things we're also working on. So there's quite a bit, and this is why my plate is always full, but I think I'm very passionate about making sure that we have more renewable energy engineers and more people who have the skills to really develop good projects on the continent.
that's a big announcement. Yeah. I think he's much better than even COP28. I
Well,
wasn't
let's see after
expecting.
COP28, yes.
I wasn't expecting that. Or thank you, but I'm really honored that you were able to share that for the first time in here. So definitely, so count on me to push that forward. And yeah, I can say, yeah, great, great, great initiative. So that's fantastic. So let
Thank
me
you.
ask you one final question. I think what you provided us today, it's a great insight, including this announcement, also the report that you shared, and show that people listening to that either now or later will have enjoyed it. So, as a director of Africa for GWEC, what would you say is your vision for the future wind power in the region, and how do you see GWEC, contributing to achieving this vision?
Great. I think I spoke at the very beginning of this when I was talking about the status of wind in Africa report, and I touched on the fact that there's 140 projects on the continent that are at various stages, accounting for 86 gigawatts of renewable technology that could be possibly deployed into our grids. That a lot of them are still not, even close to financial close or close to being developed because of the various challenges we have. So as the director of Africa Wind Power, my vision is to see wind at the forefront of energy development in Africa. Let it be a technology that people understand and speak about confidently, the same way they speak about solar, the same way they speak about other technologies. I think it's important that people understand that wind is also for Africa. It's not for other continents, it's not for other people. We have some of the best resource in the world. I'll give you an idea. In Namibia, some of the best capacity factors that you can get are in Namibia. Same thing in Kenya, where Lake Turkana wind farm is. It has over 60% capacity factors. This is unheard of, you know. And because we have this amazing resource, I really want one, Africans to understand that it's something that we can take advantage of. It's something that we can use to create jobs, bring wealth and investment into our countries. And so I really want that to be at the forefront, and that to be the legacy that Africa Wind Power leaves. And so to do that, we need to educate as much as possible. We need to be open with our knowledge. We need to, we need to expose different stakeholders to what's happening elsewhere. I know not many African people have been on offshore wind farms. Why is that? How do we get more Africans out there to see what an offshore wind farm looks like, so that we can also develop offshore wind in Africa? There's not a single project on the continent for offshore wind, whereas in places like the UK, in China, there's a lot of expertise on this. How do we bring those skills back? So there's a lot that I want to achieve with this. Of course, I want to see more women in the space, more women engineers in the renewable energy space and in wind specifically. I think that's quite important, and I'm very passionate about that. So there is a lot, Tony. I can talk about this forever, and I know we're definitely over time, but I really want to see wind, Africans talk about wind very confidently, and it being a key part of our energy mix, not just in Senegal and not just in Kenya, but all across the continent.
Well, listen, I'm pretty much sure one thing. So GWEC didn't make a mistake by choosing you to drive this effort on the continent. So the powerful story there, and I could see already things happening. So thank you very much for your time today. It was really insightful, and I'm hoping that people would have enjoyed. Like I say, you have two big announcements. The report is there. The announcement, obviously, capacity building. That for me is huge, significant, and it will make a difference. So thank you very much again for your time. And then I'm sure we'll have a time to catch up some more and do some more work together. Thank you very much for that, Wangari.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Excellent, excellent. So you've seen it all, guys. You've seen it all. Thank you very much for joining us today for this incredible journey into the world of wind power, sustainability, and also the promising future that we could see in renewables energy in Africa. I think we've had a privilege, hearing from Wangari, the director of Africa at GWEC, about her insight, that have been really truly for me enlightening. I don't know what you think, but that's really what I feel. And to sort of wrap up the conversation, I think it's evident that wind power is not just about harnessing the wind, but it's about also harnessing the potential for positive change, for economic growth, and also for a sustainable future for all. So the wind of progress are blowing, and Africa is at the forefront of this renewable energy revolution. And with Wangari, her expertise, her passion, she shed the light on the transformative power of wind energy. So the importance of collaboration, is so important, and also all the opportunity that lie ahead. You know, you need to tap into that. So it's clear that the road towards COP28 in Dubai, is paved with lots of possibilities. And I believe the continent has a significant role to play in shaping the global sustainability agenda. So I definitely want to extend my gratitude to Wangari for her valuable insights, and also all of you for your active participation. I know you were a little bit shy today, sending me a message to me as opposed to just put it on the chat, but that's just fine. We can take it like that. I just want to thank you, whether you listening to that live or later on, for your thoughtful question, for your engagement. Make sure that you actually drop some more questions. What we're going to do, we're going to respond to that. And Wangari, once she has time, because she's very, very busy, she also will contribute. And because, together, that's how we can make a cleaner, a greener, and more sustainable future. Thank you very much for this time with us today. And I'm looking forward to see you for another expert call. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.